Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are back in War Thunder having a look at the Japanese G discounts, and I've just realised that the potato launcher is going past. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. I didn't realise they even added that. Oh, that's wonderful. Anyway, back to what we're supposed to be talking about. Here is the Japanese G vehicles, and there's a good batch of ground ones and there's a bad batch of ground ones. The Hargo Commander is what we'll class as a bad one, same with the Rogo. This thing is very expensive and it's the worst heavy tank in the game. Definitely not worth your money, even to like kind of troll with or anything. The T-35 is a much better vehicle in that regard, or even something like the SMK, so don't waste your money. The Chiha shotgun though, so this thing is kind of interesting. It's a vehicle that kind of was not very good for the longest time. Nowadays with overpressure, it has this HE shell which can donk people and just overpressure them to death. So it might be a lot better than it used to be. It's still got its inherent issues, it still relies on a HE shell, which is never good, and has a really long reload and has no armor. So it probably won't do too well, but at least you can kind of guarantee a kill with the gun, and I know some people have a really fun time with that, so maybe it might be worth giving it a go at 500G, just as a little bit of fun, right? Because not every premium has to be really efficient. Sometimes it's just worth it for a bit of fun. The Chihi 5th Regiment, talking about efficiency, is a very good one. This one obviously is in the starter pack, so it might go on sale at some point. But it has very good RP rewards. It has 15 degrees of gun depression, very good reload, and also a vertical stab on the gun. The only thing where this thing kind of falls off is its penetration isn't the best, but it'll deal with the vast majority of vehicles that you'll face. The only ones it'll struggle with are some of the stuff like the M4A3105, and also the B1s if you run into those. Everything else it'll be able to deal with pretty efficiently and be able to kill. Its armor is not great, its mobility is very average, so pretty much the reason why this gun works well is because of the stab, and also, you know, if your aim's pretty good in the reload. The Chino 2 is a fantastic vehicle. This is a vehicle that I will always recommend just because of the fact that it's one of those which has access to a very good gun at a very low BR and is on a platform which is good enough mobility-wise to push it around. So it has a very good gun depression, has a pretty decent reload for the size of the gun, and if this thing pens, which it pens very easily with 151mm of penetration, it just annihilates whatever it hits. It's one of the best medium tanks at the mid-tiers of the game. It can bully pretty much anything that it faces. In a full up tier, it can still pen everything that it faces as well. It's just really, really nice. I run it at 4.7 with the Cheeto late and also the Cheeto, and because it has the same gun as them, it runs really, really well. So for me, this is a very good pick if you want to kind of grind through the Japanese tech tree and get up to those BRs where they're actually proper lineups. The Hori prototype is a vehicle which I really enjoyed the standard tech tree Hori production. Obviously, the prototype itself is not as good. You know, the reload's quite long on it, but it does have a very good round on it. It just doesn't really do anything else. It doesn't really do anything in terms of, in terms of utility. It's very much just, can you kill the enemy, and that's pretty much it, where it doesn't have any more strings to its bow. The armor on it is not great, only around about 150 on the turret, so a lot of things at 6.7 will just go straight through that. The gun, as I said, is good though, it's just the reload is pretty long. Whatever you pen will die though, which is quite nice on it. There's just been too many times in the Hori production that I've just got stuck because somebody's annihilated my transmission or something like that, and it just hasn't gone very well for me. But I will say I've massively enjoyed playing the Hori production, so I'd probably enjoy the Hori prototype as well. You can see here with the production, I'm 2-1, 54% win rate, so overall pretty good on the vehicle. I just wish that this thing was a little bit better in terms of its mobility after it got nerfed a while ago, especially when it comes to its reverse. Type 75 MLRS is one of the biggest wastes of money when it comes to the game. Yes, it has some rockets on it, but it at least historically had a ton of bugs when it came to how it actually worked. Obviously, the overpressure has given it a bit of a new life, but it is still completely worthless. The vehicle has no armor. It gets annihilated by artillery. It doesn't have anything on top of it, such as it doesn't get scouting. It does get artillery for some reason, even though it's a tank destroyer, so at least there's that. But it has very awkward aiming angles when it comes to the 130mm rockets itself, and generally it's much better just to pick up the Type 74 if you're having a look at this kind of BR to be able to, grind through a lot of the Japanese tree. This thing has one gimmick, and it's the rocket. Everything else about it is absolutely trash. It is a waste of money and a waste of your time, and it's way overvalued just because it has rockets, like a lot of vehicles in this game. For helicopters, you have the Weebcopter, the Kisarazu. It's one of the weaker premiums that's around the place, but at the same time, it does at least get a interesting camo on it, so you can at least die in style. It's a pretty standard AH-1. It has access to the 20mm M197, does get some countermeasures as well, and thermals and TOW2s. So that's, your lot with it. You can bring along 8 of them. Doesn't really have a way of defending itself when it comes to other aircraft, though. You basically have to use the guns, but at least you can do a little bit of work when it comes to the missiles. I would say out of pretty much all of the premiums helicopters, this is one of the weakest. It generally has problems when it comes to its lineups as well. The lineups that exist in ground are just non-existent. So the lineups for top tier ground for good old Japan are like 9-0 and 8-7 and then 10-7. So if you want to use this effectively, you end up using it at 10-7, and yeah, it doesn't go very well. It's much better to use something like the Japanese Apache. The only reason to buy this is if you want to use it in heli PvE to be able to grind through the tech tree to get this thing to run it with the Type 10s and the Type 90s and have a good time. By itself, it's not going to be good enough to carry anything. When it comes to the aviation side of Japan, Japan has a ton of really cool vehicles in its standard tech tree. This line here and the other line are just really fun to grind through, and a lot of this line is not bad either. But the bomber line is pretty bad. There's not many redeeming qualities. The twin engines are also quite fun. Like I've enjoyed my time in them quite a lot. So, I would say just kind of grind through the tech tree instead of buying premiums. But if you want to buy premiums, there are a ton of really nice ones. Don't bother with any of these. They're not really worth it because you can just get into these very quickly. The Key 44s are obviously fantastic vehicles. They work insanely well. Both the premiums have 12.7s on them, so they work really nicely. The Key 102 is also pretty good. Once again, has the 12.7s, so can do decent damage. It's just very close to copies of the standard tech tree stuff. The F4U-1A is broken. This thing has been broken for a very long time. It's way under BR'd for its actual power level, has a ton of 50 cals, has a really powerful engine, and is a perfect either boom and zoom fighter or even energy fighter, depending on what you're facing. If this thing gets down-tiered, you can't kill it. If this thing gets up-tiered, it still does really well. Has insanely good SL rewards on it as well. This thing is just nuts. I know a lot of people who use this to grind SL in Air RB because it's unstoppable. It's just an insanely good aircraft. The BF-197 is fine, but just buy this instead. The H8K3, I suppose if you want kind of a slow bomber with a ton of turrets on it, you can pick this thing up. I don't think it's worth it though, because its actual bomb loads are not large enough to really consider it useful. Like, it gets 2 800s and then it also gets the torpedoes, but it's just a massive target. Like, it's really easy to hit in ground and naval forces, and even though it can defend itself from the air with all the 20s and everything, it's just not good enough. Like, it's very expensive as well for what it is. The Key 96 is very bad. I wouldn't bother with it. Its engines aren't powerful enough to justify its BR. The P51C11 is obviously quite good. It's one of the earlier P51s, but in general I think that there are better options just because of the fact that this is, it has less armament and also no ground ordnance either. The Key 61 high, this is one of the stronger Key 61s. The earlier Key 61s are better than the late ones, and this one has access to the 20mm, so it can do a ton of damage. It's also very maneuverable for what it is. I prefer the Key 61s without the 20s just because of the enhanced maneuverability, but this one is a good jack of all trades plane, probably not as good as some of the other ones around. The Focke-Wulf 190, it's got a very specific playstyle. It can do very well in that playstyle, but it's more of an arcade plane than a realistic one. In realistic, it can get bullied very easily because it requires a lot of setup, and that setup is not always there from your team. They did buff it with the elevator control, but it's still not good enough. The A7M1 is a destroyer of worlds. This thing is insane. Just like its standard tech tree variants, the A7M2, it has really good armament on it, 220mm, even though they're Type 99s, they're still completely fine, and also two 13.2s. The A7 is pretty much a Zero, which has access to much better energy performance, so it's one of those vehicles where if you are trying to target an enemy, it isn't what your strengths are, it's what the weaknesses of the enemy are that you can exploit, because this thing is good at everything. So it's not brilliant at everything, but it's good at everything. So whatever your enemy is bad at, you can engage it in that way and you can annihilate it. This thing is very good and also has very, very good rewards on it. It's definitely worth looking at when it comes to the Japanese tree. It gets 260 kilo bombs as well, which give it obviously a little bit more oomph. Then you have the J2M4 Kai. I really like the J2 series. I think they're very good fighters in general. They don't really have a weakness apart from against very good turn fighters like Spitfires. But then again, you can just extend, reset and then attack again. I really like all of them. The J2M5 though is probably the weakest one because it just has the Dodo cannons. So 230mm, this is just a meme machine. Like if you want to meme a bit, I suppose it's a bit of fun, but apart from that, just get a useful fighter. The B-17's here as well if you want to grind stuff out, but I think that there are better options than the B-17. The major difference, you get the 6-1000s and the 12-500s. It's not really worth it at the end of the day. And then also you got the Ki-87, which is a high-altitude fighter, and you never fight at high altitude anymore, so it doesn't work, especially with the Japanese, which are much more mid to low-altitude things. The F-40 did get lowered in BR, so it's a bit better than it was before. There's a lot of vehicles that got moved to 9.0 nowadays, so hopefully it actually fights at its own BR bracket, but 9.7 is still way too strong for this thing. It gets annihilated by 9.7 and 10.0s. If the matchmaking is more around 8.393 or 8.797, it'll do really, really well. But unfortunately, that's not the case most of the time. So this vehicle, it gets access to AIM-9Bs. If you do decide to play it, make sure to uninstall your boosters so you don't rip your wings off. But I wouldn't recommend it at all. I think it's much better to either get the T2, but then again, that's quite expensive, or just kind of grind through all of this rank 4 stuff for Japan, which is super fun to play. For the naval side of Japan, there is some interesting premiums, but I would say there's probably better tech tree stuff. And also at the same time, the best, I suppose, this side premium or this side vehicle you can get is actually the Shimakaze. This thing is insane in arcade. It works very well because of all of its torpedoes. You can just keep launching them and watch TV shows in the background. The Satsuki is just a Matsuki class, so it's exactly the same. Not worth it at all. The Matsuki has some real issues with it. Its guns aren't the best. It's got a low reload and also doesn't really have any way of defending itself against planes. So it's just torpedo bait. Then you have these two, which are event vehicles. I wish this one was a premium because this one's really good. The Yubari is a light cruiser. It's part of the Yubari class. I wouldn't recommend this either. It has it has two dual 140s, but they're in awkward angles because mainly of this thing here. So getting them on target is not the easiest. And then also their fire rate is not the best either. Only 6 seconds per round for 4 guns. Not good enough at 4.7. You're just going to get annihilated by American destroyers. Has one 120 as well and a bunch of 25s on it. I've never liked the 25s as AA weapons. I don't think they work very well. And then also it gets the bad torpedoes, so it's just a bad pickup. I don't know how else to put it. It's at least a rank 3, so you can do specials with it. But the early cruisers for the early cruisers for Japan are super rough. The Makuma's not a bad pick though. This one has access to a ton of different guns. You know, you've got the 5 triple mounted 155mm. They pack a hell of a punch when they hit people. It also has the 4 dual mounted 5 inches and also the 25s and 13.2s. As a vehicle to bring out first, I think it works really well. It's one of the better heavy cruisers in the game and also sits quite low in the water. Obviously, if you face battle cruisers and battleships, you'll get eaten alive, but welcome to being a heavy cruiser. So pretty much as simple as that. I think this one's definitely worth a pickup if you're looking to grind through this tech tree. A lot of Japan is like top heavy, so a lot of these vehicles are really good, but the lower tier ones, like the mid tier ones, are super rough. So the Makuva might be good to kind of get through all of these. I definitely think looking for the event vehicles, though, like these 3, is worth it as well, because they're all pretty good in their own way. Coastal fleet-wise, T-14's useless, don't bother with it. By the way, the coastal fleet for Japan, it's got some bright sparks, but overall it's very weak, so it's hard to justify kind of grinding that out. This thing is just this, but the same, so don't bother with it, waste of time. Just has a slightly different armament on it, making it slightly better, but it'll still get, you know, annihilated. Then you've got the Type 4 Mod 4. So this one is at least unique in the way that its actual engines work, because obviously it's more of the blades on the top instead of on the bottom. But that's the only interesting thing about it. It's completely useless in the game. It doesn't have a good enough armament to be useful. The Type T51 is obviously the Battle Pass one, and then you're up to the Akebono. So the Akebono is alright, like it has the dual 40 on it and the 2 3 inches. The 3 inches have a really good fire rate. So against stuff like PT boats or other battle boats, it can do really well. But because this thing is at free, it can actually go and get attacked by a lot of destroyers, and it just gets eaten alive. So it's very good against certain machines and terrible against others. So it's so much matchup dependent. I would say it's probably not worth it. The PGO2, once again, very matchup dependent, but since you can get close to coastal boats really quickly with this thing, and it also has the crazy good 20mm on it, I think this is worth a pickup if you're looking to grind through this tech tree. Just remember to uninstall this, and then you can just manage the overheat of it. You can do a ton of damage with this thing. A small spray can kill any PT boat or any battle boat, and it's really good pretty much against anything from coastal tech trees. It's no good against destroyers, but if you play your cards right, you never have to face anything like destroyers, so generally it's not too bad. So this would be my pickup from the coastal tech tree, and probably the Makuma from the blue water stuff. As always though, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank Forge, Siegebreak, Carrion Crow, Nicholas Richardson, Elove Goat, Pyman, Winter Scientist, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, and also Sem Arslan, Wilkski, Uncle Bean, Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.